Okay, hey everyone.
Hello.
I haven't read since high school.
I don't like reading.
Reading makes me sleepy.
Is there a movie version?
Here we are, in a room full of 45 students who are required to take sophomore literature by the Board of Regents.
Their majors range from English, construction, pre-farm, pre-nursing, rad tech, you name it.
And we're supposed to engage them with stories that range from Beowulf to Baldwin.
In literature, we tell our students that the textbook is the most important source they need to arm themselves with if they want to succeed. But what if the text became the secondary source? Meaning, the primary source becomes the reader, and in a way, the educator.
Educator, a term unencumbered by provisional titles like professor, instructor, adjunct, tenure track, non-tenure track, graduate student. The content of a sophomore lit course is essentially stories, which are by nature inclusive and should be treated that way by educators and students.
In humanities, we teach our students how to be humans, and it's hard. Fostering empathy ultimately teaches them how to better understand others and themselves. It's a form of critical thinking that involves application.
We strive to ask the questions that don't always exist in every space. And we do this by using our experiential knowledge and encouraging our students to do the same. We transform our diverse experience into teaching and learning methods that could better connect with our growing and diverse student population.
In a sophomore survey class, I combined James Baldwin's Notes of a Native Son and the internal rage that Black people have to either succumb or suppress with Ralph Ellison's Prologue to Invisible Man, where he asserts that invisibility is simply others' refusal to see you. The combination of these two texts sparked a question. Do you feel as if you belong on this campus? Student response ranged from yes, because of extracurricular activities and creating their own sub-communities, and no, because of lack of representation and inclusion. I helped them unpack the weight of their answers through a question that was very heavy. So, the articulation of this question allowed a student to say, Ms. Harris, I feel as though some white students get to be war hawks, and I only get to get a degree. In that moment, I wanted to reassure them that they belonged and they were valued and they worked just as hard. I wanted to tell them my collegiate anecdotes. I wanted to figure out how I could fix it or if it would be appropriate to hug them all, and it's not appropriate. But I realized that that would be denying them the opportunity that they needed to speak freely. They didn't need me to fix or to coddle. They needed a space and a place where they could share stories, where they could agree and disagree. The dialogue sparked by Baldwin's rage and Ellison's invisibility allowed my students to move from passive learners to active learners. The two best compliments I've recently received from students were, Ms. Harris, there's never a simple question in this class. And, Ms. Harris, I never get to leave and just not think. My response to both, you're welcome. This is how students become the primary source.
in a world lit class that was focused on colonial and post-colonial perspectives, I introduced Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and as a supplementary text, I introduced Nigerian writer Chinua Achebe's criticism of Heart of Darkness, titled An Image of Africa, Racism in Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I did this so that students could get varying perspectives on the plight of the explorer, which is essentially to describe what they have very little or no experiential knowledge of. And students found Achebe intriguing, but they still grappled with some of his concepts. In addition to that, Conrad is a difficult read. Conrad is long-winded, heavily descriptive, and that made it really difficult to understand the problematic discourse that the protagonist, Marlowe, the European explorer, uses to describe the Congo and the people of the Congo. So, to better explain othering and ethnocentrism, I use a personal story, which you will now get. A few years ago, I was dating a guy, and when we first started dating, he showed my picture to his mother, with my hair in all of its glory, as you see it now. She looked at the picture, she looked at him, and she asked, "Is she black?" To which he replied, "No, she's Puerto Rican." To which she replied, "Which one of them are they?" Yes. Now, my students were appropriately bewildered, but I explained that she meant no malice with that question. She meant perhaps authentic curiosity and unfamiliarity. I was probably her first Puerto Rican. And in Marlowe's case, the people of the Congo were probably his first black people. However, as we know, terms like which one of them are they, and in Marlowe's case, words like savage and ugly to describe the people of the Congo, speak to a willful ignorance that has serious social repercussions. Repercussions that we encounter in our everyday, and it is those social parallels that students can actually grab onto. Suddenly, this character that's set in the late 1800s becomes kind of relevant, and the text is no longer foreign or antiquated. There might be some similarities. And it is in those similarities that students find some kind of connection. Maybe not in Marlowe traveling up the darkness of the Congo River, but the human parts. And that's what I tried to convey with my anecdote. And that's how I became the primary source of that lesson. It's merely a pragmatic choice that helps student engagement, understanding, and introspection of a text that is more human than academic.
In a 45-person class, the separation between student and educator appears massive. But we narrow that space by tailoring our courses to universal topics. We succeed by using our broad experiences, not just as women of color, but through our involvement on campus and the community, which enriches our viewpoints.
Educators need to be consistently malleable to the ever-changing student population, especially at a cultural and generational level. When I teach to the student I was, automatically my classroom experience becomes one that is focused on helping students see themselves and others in the text.
Using my entire being as a teaching tool, I become the primary source. I then can teach at the ground level instead of at a pedestal or on a pedestal.
That doesn't mean that we have the whole picture. But isn't that an erroneous way of approaching such a pluralistic discipline, that's the beauty and power of literature.
No one can lay claim to experience. It's that thread that ties student to educator. It also dissolves those traditional titles and roles and allows us to be inspired, inspires us enough to color outside of rigid lines.
I get it.
It's not so bad.
Maybe the book is better. Thank you.